hearing on his qualifications to do
No,
this?
no, Your Honor.
Okay, cool. And I'll tell you, that's the extent to which any expertise, if any, is sought from the state.
Okay, we're ready. Please bring me.
All rise.
Your Honor, the state of Texas calls Michael Adcock.
Thank you, sir. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you. Please make yourself comfortable.
May I proceed, Judge?
Yes.
Ranger, would you please say, God bless you.
Excuse me.
Ranger, would you say and spell your full name for the court's reporter?
It's Michael Adcock. It's Michael Adcock.
And what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm employed by the Texas Department of Public Safety, assigned as a Texas Ranger and stationed in Athens.
Okay. And how long have you been a Texas Ranger?
Almost 11 years.
As part of your training and experience with the Texas Rangers in the law enforcement function, have you been asked before to take scans using an instrument called a Leica?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on September, as part of the investigation of this particular case, I think it was September 11th, did you perform a Leica scan inside apartment 1478?
Yes, sir, I did.
And just for purposes of the record, would you spell Leica for the reporter?
It's Leica.
Okay. And if you would, can you let the jury know what is the Leica instrument, and can you give just a basic idea of how it works and what it does?
Okay, it's a three-dimensional scanner. It emits a laser that rotates 360 degrees by 290 degrees vertically over the top. It doesn't capture underneath the tripod that it's sitting on about 3 feet. The laser captures the data wherever it strikes, more or less. It creates a point, and it creates millions of points per second. And so if we were to scan this courtroom today, it's a line of sight instrument, so whatever that laser would see, it would recreate all of us, everything in here in a three-dimensional space.
And are those measurements, does it take like millions of measurements?
Each one of those points you can obtain a measurement by connecting 2 of them or more.
Okay. And does the software that is part of the Leica instrument, does it save and record those data points so that you can generate a 3D image of the particular scene of the scan?
Yes, sir.
And once you have that image of a particular area, are you able to go in and take measurements from point to point and get very good approximations of distances?
Yes, sir.
On September the 11th of 2018, I think you already testified that you did do a scan of apartment 1478.
Yes, sir.
And prior to that, are you aware or do you know if the Dallas Police Department took a Leica scan inside 1478 as well?
Yes, sir, they did.
All right, were you provided a copy of their scan?
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed their scan as well?
Yes, sir.
And have you reviewed your scan?
Yes, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Major Adcock, I asked you to bring me a copy today of your scan on a USB drive, and I'm showing which the marked identification is State's Exhibit 255. Will you look at that USB drive and tell me if that is what you handed to me this morning?
Yes, sir, it is.
And will you tell me what's on that?
It's my entire file that contains everything that I did related to the Leica scan.
Okay, is it just data, or do you have any kind of narrative like offense report or any kind of supplemental report, or is it just the data?
It's the data and any snapshots that were taken from the data.
Okay. General Law for State's Exhibit 255.
Object.
It's admitted.
Ranger, when you were inside apartment 1478, did you also notice what appeared to be a bullet defect in the south wall?
Yes, sir, it did.
All right. Would you just describe what that bullet defect looked like to you?
It was a circular defect that had an apparent bullet wipe ring. And what a bullet wipe ring is just lubricants or anything that's on the outside exterior of that bullet as it enters through that wall. It's just a darker color ring around it.
And did it seem to be like a good circular pattern on it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you find out whether or not there was a second point, potentially in the path of that bullet from the south wall beyond?
The bullet path was pretty clean through the wall.
Okay. So did you have a second point which you might be able to attempt a trajectory analysis?
Yes, sir.
Or sometimes, some call it, I think you prefer the word flight path analysis.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did in order to see whether or not the bullet defect would be suitable for a potential trajectory or bullet path analysis?
Well, first, I visually looked at it to see that, make sure that there was two good points inside that path of that bullet. Then I took we have a trajectory kit that contains metal rods, and we have two different diameter rods, and so this one, I used the appropriate caliber rod to put through the hole and put it on the leading edge of the defect, which that is where the bullet strikes that target very first. You can observe where it initially was there. So I placed that. That's going to be my first point. And then I have to make sure that the exit defect is not blown out in such a manner that you can't get a good flight path there. So I checked that. The rod was pretty tight inside the defect through the wall, and so I determined that I could get an angle from that.
Okay. And did you confirm that with, I believe what's called an inclinometer?
Yes, sir.
And also, did you use a protractor and a plumb to confirm the other angles?
Yes, sir.
What two different kinds of angles are you wanting to achieve in this trajectory analysis?
Well, we capture the up and down angle, the vertical angle, and then we capture the horizontal angle, which is left to right or right to left on the target surface.
And what were your respective angles?
The vertical angle is a 7.5 degree up angle, and the horizontal angle is, if you look at it, if you're measuring off of 0, which is perpendicular, or 90, it's entering the wall at a 17 degree traveling left to right.
So from this information, what did you do?
I placed that rod in there. Also wanted to capture it with the scanner. So I placed the scanner perpendicular to that rod. Also, the rod's kind of shiny. The laser does not like to absorb it absorbs in shiny things that we found in the past. So I sprayed this flight path rod with some gray primer so it would appear a whole lot better in the scans.
Ranger, as far as your ability to have conducted the flight path analysis, did you actually have to move like the couch and the ottoman and anything that was kind of in that corner where that bullet defect was so that you could get up there on a ladder?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there was some movement of the furniture in the living room area before the Leica scan was taken showing the trajectory analysis.
Yes, sir.
But that was necessary for you to achieve that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But just again, if we already know that there had been movement of certain furnishings right after the event, we also know now that there's additional movement of items because you have to do a trajectory analysis for the purposes of your scan on September the 11th.
Yes, sir.
All right. So let me just ask the question like this, because I am going to show some of the still photographs of your scan. You're not suggesting to the jury where the couch and the ottoman and everything is. That's where they were at the time that the event occurred. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Right. Is your concentration going to be on the flight path of the bullet that came out of the defendant's gun and went through the south wall?
Yes, sir. That was my main purpose that day for the scans.
All right. You didn't do any kind of a trajectory analysis of the bullet that struck the complainant, correct?
No, sir.
All right, but you did do one of the bullet that hit the south wall.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so, and I interrupted you. You said that you used the Leica instrument then to scan after you had painted the rod so that it would pick it up better. Would you just continue from there and tell us what else you did?
I've scanned from that one location. And like I said, the scanner is a line of sight instrument, so I have to move to capture additional data of the room. So I moved in the kitchen area and conducted a second scan. We have what is termed as a twin target pole. It's another tripod that has two targets on a pole that we also scan in there. And within the data, we can measure between those two targets. And that pole is certified to be a certain target, and that gives us the accuracy of all our measurements in the scan.
All right, so based on the verifications that you just did, do you have confidence in the flight path analysis as it exists for the bullet in the south wall to some point wherever the defendant may have been, but somewhere along that flight path?
Yes, sir.
And the flight path analysis, again, to confirm, I want you to tell me if I've got this right, it's going to be 8 degrees elevation, or 7.5 to 8 degrees elevation, and 17 degree, is it pronounced azimuth?
Yes, sir.
And were those numbers correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think I had asked you earlier whether or not the Leica instrument, after you've got all of your data, is that called a point cloud?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It is then the computer software that Leica has. It combines this data in the various scans into like a three-dimensional image for which measurements, very good, strong approximations can be made.
Yes, sir.
May I approach the witness, Sean?
Yes.
So, Ranger, I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as States Exhibits 274 through 281, and ask you whether or not these are going to be measurements. Let's just start with 274. 274, is that going to be a measurement that I asked you to do from the floor to the deadbolt lock on apartment 1478?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. And States Exhibit number 275, is that going to be a height that I asked you to get from inside 1478 from the floor to the top of the kitchen counter where the sink is?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. This 276 going to be the measurement from the top of that counter to the globe lighting that's hanging, the 3 globe lights that are hanging that separates the kitchen area from the living area.
Yes, sir, it is.
And then I asked you to give me 2 perspectives, one from an eye level of 5 feet and one from an eye level of 5 feet 1 inches, because the eyes are actually not, if we were to take my height, my eyes are a few inches below the top of my head, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. But also my height has been slightly elevated by shoes.
Yes, sir.
All right. So for approximation purposes, did I ask you to give me a perspective into 1478 from an eye level of 5 foot and an eye level of 5'1"?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is States Exhibit number 277 going to be the approximation of the view into the apartment from 5 foot?
Yes, sir.
And just for purposes, from the door into the kitchen, did we just select that you would do slightly about where the door ends? In other words, well, if this door were to open, from approximately where the door fully open comes to an end with the gun out that just reaches into the kitchen area. Was that and I asked you to do that particular area, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For no particular reason, just that was the perspective of the millions of perspectives that we could get that I asked you to give me this angle.
Yes, sir.
All right. States Exhibit number 277A, is that going to be the same 5'0" eye level from approximately the same location, but this time from DPD scan?
Yes, sir, it is.
States Exhibit number 278, is it going to be again from the same location between the door but in front of the kitchen counter, from a 5'1" eye level?
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit 278A, is that going to be, again, the same general location, but now, and also from a 5'1" eye level, but this time using DPD scan?
Yes, sir.
And then 279, is that going to be the flight path analysis that you derived having used the Leica and the more traditional way, the protractor, plumb, and inclinometer?
Yes, sir.
All right, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. State's Exhibit number 280, is that going to be, if you were looking through the hole on the south wall that you've described for the jury, if you were looking through that hole and you followed the path all the way to where the door is for 1478, all the way to as far back as the door actually across the hall?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then lastly, 281, is that also going to be the same flight path, except now instead from a top view, this is from a side view, as if the wall of 1478 where the TV is has been removed and you're just looking into the apartment and you're looking at the couch from that particular angle?
Yes, sir.
All right. Ranger, are these going to be the images that you sent to me without additions, modifications, deletions? Are these fair and accurate depictions of what you sent?
Yes, sir, it is.
I offer 274 through 281.
May I take the witness on the board iron very quickly?
Yes.
Ranger Adcock, there were two, I believe, two DVD scans in here. Was their data different than your data?
The difference between their data and our data was that they conducted a whole lot more scans. They scanned a whole lot greater area, and they probably scanned different locations inside the apartment. But as far their data and my data should be exactly the same inside the apartment.
No objection.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Ranger, you have next to you a monitor. Feel free to, whatever is most comfortable for you, you can look there or you can look on these TVs, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm publishing State's Exhibit number 274. All right, Ranger, is that going to be the front door of apartment 1478 as it existed on September the 11th, 2018?
Yes, sir.
Did you derive a height of approximately 3.525 feet from the floor to the locking mechanism, the key fob locking mechanism for that particular apartment?
Yes, sir, the best I could with the data that I had present.
God bless you. All right. So, if a person was taller than 3.5 feet, they would have to look down in order to insert a key into that particular lock. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit number 275. Again, let's have this conversation with the jury too. The Leica scans with the lasers, they don't actually depict things like a photograph when they're generated. Is that accurate?
No, sir, that's a different function within the scan that we have to perform.
Because what the jury's looking at right now with respect to 275, it looks like a very pixelated computer-generated image. Is that how the Leica system, the instrument itself, depicts the data in a visual form?
Yes, sir, we refer this to as the point cloud data.
Okay. So the data is accurate, but it doesn't necessarily look like a photograph that will be taken with a camera.
No, sir.
So is the height from the floor to the counter 2.996 feet?
Yes, sir, that's what I measured.
Okay, and we can measure this later on with a tape measure. stand up for me 1 second, Jason? But this counter right here is 3 feet. Do you have any reason to disagree with that?
If you say so.
So if this is 3 feet, just as a benchmark within the court, that's going to be the height of that particular kitchen counter.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. State's Exhibit number 276. Is that going to be 3.150 feet? Is that going to be from the top of the, I'm going to call this island here the kitchen countertop, okay? Is the height of that, or from the top of that to the globe lights, an additional 3.150 feet?
Yes, sir.
So if you add that to the 3 feet or the 2.996 feet, you're talking about 6.150 feet from the floor to the bottom of the globe lights.
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit number 277. All right. This one here has got a little bit more pixelation, so I want to make sure everyone's oriented. Is this going to be the countertop area here that we've just discussed?
Yes, sir.
All right. And up here are the globe lights.
Yes, sir.
All right. And back here is the door. And this is going to be the kind of like the well of the kitchen area in this area.
Yes, sir.
It's back here going to be the living room area of 1478.
Yes, sir.
So from, and this is the perspective, eye level of 5 feet, 0 inches, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so from, at least from that perspective, you can see into the living room area from that height.
Yes, sir.
And then I asked you to do the same thing on State's Exhibit number 277A using DPD scan. Is there a reason why DPD scan is in black and white?
That's just in grayscale. I don't remember if they did photographs or along with their scans or not.
Okay. And I think I've noticed in every one of the scans, there seems to be like this big circle. It's in different places than yours, but there's a big circle on these. What is that?
That's the 3-foot area that I described earlier that the scanner does not capture underneath itself.
Okay. So when it scans all the way around, but directly underneath it, it doesn't.
Yes, sir. It gets about 290 degrees
Okay.
Over the top.
And then I asked you to do from, again, the same perspective at 5 feet 1 inches eye level. This is from your scan, correct?
Yes, sir.
We allow this an opportunity to focus. Okay, so again, from a position kind of where I used the bar here. For the front door of the apartment, fully opened, is this going to be placing, from the perspective at least of these images, from this location, of the apartment?
That location or maybe just slightly backwards in that general area though.
Okay, slightly more backwards towards the door.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, just for the jury, for visual purposes, if this is the door to the apartment fully open, are you saying somewhere within this area here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't ask you for an exact, just rough placement, just for perspective purposes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So from a 5 foot 1 eye level then, is this going to be the perspective into the kitchen and living room areas on 278?
Yes, sir.
And then on 278A, same general location.
Yes, sir.
But from DPD's data, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you're able to, with these scans, you've been in constant conversation with both the DA's office, and we've invited you in, you've spoken with the defense, and they can talk to you about the case, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You can give either side a perspective from any different angle or from any different position, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Again, just to emphasize, this was an arbitrary position, just to show one particular location, but you can present right now any location if they want you to.
Yes, sir.
Or us, if we want you to.
Yes, sir.
So State's Exhibit number 279. Now we're going to be talking about the trajectory analysis that you did on that bullet hole defect to the south wall. Is this going to be, where my pen is right now, the approximate location of where the bullet defect was in that south wall?
Yes, sir.
And then you did the process that you described earlier, and you scanned what you believe to be the flight path from that bullet defect. And this is going to be, what's the left to right one called? Is that the azimuth?
Yes, sir, or horizontal.
Okay. So your flight path would indicate a bullet that is traveling left to right. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, relative to the target that it strikes.
Okay. And this line that is in the center of it, can you tell me, give the jury an idea, what is, it looks like you've got a yellow cone that surrounds this brighter yellow line in the middle. Can you give us an idea of what that is?
Yes, in shooting reconstruction, in my training, and it's a standard that's done in this discipline, that you give plus or minus 5 degrees to what your measurement, because if we all measured that defect, more than likely we're not all going to have the same measurement that we get, but we're going to be within that range plus or minus 5 degrees. So in this scan, it allows me to put a 5-degree cone based off that flight path of the trajectory in there. So that cone is a 5-degree cone that runs along the flight path.
So, and let me just ask it like this, because, you know, I don't have your training and experience in doing a Leica scan or flight path analysis. But is it your testimony that you believe that the bullet flew along this pathway, at least to the point where it entered into the wall?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but as far as how back it goes, that is, you can't ascertain that with any degree of scientific accuracy, is that correct?
No, sir.
But it would be, no matter how far back it is, it's going to be along this line.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if the shooter was here, then it's going to follow the line from there. Is that right? Let me do this again. All right, so if the shooter was here, not the shooter, the gun actually, because that line indicates the gun, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the shooter is positioned there, and that bullet traveled like that.
Yes, sir.
And if the shooter was here, then it traveled like that.
Yes, sir. Just to clarify, it'd be the muzzle to the target.
Right, and I thank you for that, not just the gun. The bullet comes out the muzzle, and that's going to be the flight path. The second it exits the muzzle, and then goes into its flight to where you know it ended.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's what this line is going to depict.
Yes, sir.
And you said that it was a 5-degree cone, plus or minus?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that account for the fact that there is always inherent some sort of a range of error that is just built into the flight path analysis?
Yes, sir.
Is that standard?
Yes, sir, it is.
Let me just make sure. Is your 5% going to be 5% plus or minus, or is it 2.5 plus or minus?
No, that's a 5-degree cone, 5 degrees from that flight path, so it's encompass that.
Would that mean it encompasses the 10%?
No, sir, it's 5 degrees.
5 degrees, got it. Okay. 280, is this going to be what you would be looking at, again, using the trajectory flight path analysis, if you were looking at that bullet hole, say like you could fit in between the wall, and you were looking through that bullet hole in the south wall, and you were looking down, does this actually put like a dot right here, which is actually going to be on the door of the apartment across the hall, just to kind of show where that goes until there was something that stopped that laser light?
This perspective is looking down the cone, and it's as best as I could to get in line with where that line is, and what you're seeing is the point of that line.
Right. And again, the point that I wanted to make with you, Ranger, is you're doing this so that we can see perspective. You're not suggesting to the jury or to us that the shooter shot from the door across the hallway, are you?
No, sir.
You're just showing where that laser or where that line would end on an object, and it just arbitrarily was going to be that door across the hall.
Yes, sir.
And then State's Exhibit number 281, is this going to be again the flight path analysis, but now instead of from the top view down, this is like from the side view in,
Yes, sir.
with the same 5-degree cone around the trajectory line itself?
Yes, sir, it is.
Again, you're able to do this sort of a flight path analysis on the defect in the wall, but you weren't able to, nor did you do a flight path analysis to the complainant because you didn't have that data. Is that right?
That's correct.
But the medical examiner, he would know, having opened up the body, the path of the bullet within the body.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ranger, I only wanted to ask you, I think, one other thing. As part also, in addition to the Leica scan and mapping the flight path from the wall, you were also asked to look at the defendant's work uniform that had been seized from her on the evening of September the 6th, or maybe the early morning hours of September the 7th, 2018. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Who had possession of that uniform? Was it originally with DPD?
Yes, sir.
And did you go or did someone from your office, your agency, get it from DPD, or did you go to DPD to do your analysis?
No, I obtained that evidence from DPD and then transported it to the Garland Ranger office and transferred it to Ranger Armstrong.
Okay. And did you inspect that uniform?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you inspect the pants and the shirt?
Yes, sir.
Did you do the boots as well?
Yes, sir.
Did you look to see whether or not you could see any apparent blood, or what could be blood on that particular uniform?
Yes, sir.
All right, did you do 3 different inspections? Did you do well, you tell me, what inspections did you do?
Well, first of all, we visually inspected each item visually to see if we could see apparent blood on there. Then we used a UV light just because it was dark clothing. The blood does not fluoresce, but with it being dark clothing, we wanted to use that light source just to see if we could see any kind of stains at all that we could test to see if it's suspected blood or not. So we did that, and then we used a chemical called Blue Star. It's a chemical luminescent. When it connects with blood, it luminesces and more or less glows. It luminesces was the proper term.
All right, so let's take those in kind. On your visual inspection of the uniform and boots, did you see anything that made you and your human eye say, hey, that could be blood?
I believe we found one stain that we looked at that we didn't know what it was. It was a darker colored stain, and I think we tested it with a presumptive blood test kit, but it did not test positive.
Okay. So that was the visual inspection?
Yes, sir.
No indication of blood on the visual inspection?
No, sir.
All right, then you said you did a second level test, which was is it the alternate or the alternative light source?
It's the same thing, a UV light.
Okay, so you looked at the uniform and boots under the UV light to see whether or not it indicated the presence of blood?
Yes, sir.
Did it?
No, sir.
And then you did a third level test called the Chemiluminescence Test.
Yes, sir.
All right, and is that Blue Star?
Yes, sir.
That's the brand name that we're all kind of familiar with?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury what happens when you apply Blue Star to a surface and it comes in contact with blood.
We mix the mixture up ourselves. It comes in tablet form. We put it in distilled water so it's nothing reacts to the water. We usually test that spray before we use it on any kind of thing to make sure that it's working properly, and we did in this case. We had known blood standards. We did that. So then we sprayed the item of clothing to see if we could see any anything luminescent on it.
Okay. And did you see anything that was indicative of blood when you used that third level test?
No, sir.
What did you do with the uniform then?
We let the garments dry, and then Ranger Armstrong repackaged the items.
Ranger, I'm going to show you what's already in evidence is State's Exhibit number 54. Are you familiar with some of the weaponry or the defensive weapons that a police officer carries on or about their person in the performance of their duties?
Yes, sir.
And are you familiar with them by sight? You can look at it and indicate what you suspect that particular item is?
Yes, sir, it's possible.
All right. Can you tell the jury what you believe this particular device to be right there on, this is State's Exhibit number 54, it looks like on the left by the left hand of the defendant.
I believe that's a taser.
And what does a taser do?
It emits two probes and provides a electric stun to the person that it strikes.
And do you know what, have you ever deployed a taser device before?
No, sir.
I won't ask you any more questions. What does this item appear to be just in front of the taser device?
It appears to be magazine holders that contain, looks like it contains a magazine in each one of them for the handgun.
Okay. So those contain bullets, for lack of a better word.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And going past the buckle, can you tell the jury what that particular item is?
It could be OC spray, but I can't see it, but that looks like the holder that would house that.
Okay, and if it is, I'll show you another angle here in a second, but can you tell the jury what OC spray is?
It's pepper spray. It's just another defensive tool that officers sometimes carry.
All right, and have you ever deployed OC spray on an individual?
Yes, sir.
What is the effect when you deploy OC spray on an individual?
It stuns them and burns it causes tearing and stuff, and it's more of a distractionary deterrent.
And then, of course, by the defendant's right arm, can you tell me what that particular item is?
I believe that's her duty handgun.
I'm going to give you two State Exhibit number 55, which I think will make it a little bit clearer. By the defendant's right hand, is that going to be a semi-automatic handgun?
Yes, sir. What it looks like.
All right, and now you've got another perspective of that canister-looking holder. Does that confirm your belief, or does it detract from it that that's an OC spray holder?
It appears to be that.
And then on the back, can you tell the jury what that particular item is?
That's a handheld radio.
Okay. And if an officer is in trouble, needs immediate assistance, what is their primary method of communication?
It's the radio, I guess.
Okay. If you have a cell phone, you can use it as well.
Yes, sir.
What typically in a patrol kind of capacity, when you want to get in touch with police personnel immediately without having to go through like a call taker, what would be the preference generally?
I guess the radio.
And I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 57. Can you tell me what this item is right here?
Could you point at it again? I didn't.
Yes, sir, I sure can. Right here in the left pocket by the defendant's left hand. You can see them a little bit more.
It appears to be a knife with a clip.
Okay. Like to put, God bless you. State's Exhibit 57 back up one more time on the oriented. All right. Ranger Adcock, next to the handheld radio, can you tell me what this particular device appears to be? Again, right by the left arm of the defendant.
It could be a flashlight.
All right, the last item I asked you to look at before the flashlight, which might have been indicative of a pocket knife, the clasp that goes onto a pocket. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 178, already in evidence. If this is going to be from the contents of the uniform that was seized from the defendant, can you tell me what that item appears to be?
Appears to be a knife.
State's Exhibit 179.
Appears to be a knife.
And then I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 182. Again, if this was depicted or described as the contents of the uniform, those appear to be standard issue latex gloves.
Yes, sir.
Do you see any apparent blood on any of those gloves that were within the uniform of the defendant?
Not from that picture, no, sir.
Just visually?
No, sir.
And I understand, I haven't asked you to do any kind of additional testing on that, but do you see anything just that stands out to the naked eye?
Not from that picture, no, sir.
And then State's Exhibit number 183, again, the gloves from the uniform, do they appear to be fresh?
Yes, sir.
Do they appear to have any kind of blood on them?
No, sir, not from that picture.
I'll pass it witness.
Ranger Adcock, how long have you been in law enforcement?
For 31 years.
And all with the Department of Public Safety, or were you with another law enforcement agency prior to DPS?
I was with another law enforcement agency
And where was that?
in Hyco.
And then you went to the academy and graduated from the DPS academy in what year?
in 97.
And then how long were you in highway patrol?
Approximately 6 years
And where were you assigned in highway patrol?
in Fairfield.
And that's just south of Dallas.
Yes, sir.
And when did, from highway patrol going to the Rangers, were you in any other units between those?
Yes, sir.
What units were those?
I was in our intelligence unit in our CID division.
And then when did you become part of the Texas Rangers?
In October 2008.
And where are you currently assigned?
Athens.
And is that Company B?
Yes, sir.
And so you regularly assist law enforcement in Henderson County and oftentimes some of the surrounding counties as well with regard to major cases, homicides, officer-involved shootings. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, what you have the Leica scan training is in addition to the crime scene training that you undergo probably in CID, but definitely as a Texas Ranger, correct?
Yes, sir, primarily in Texas Ranger.
And the Leica scan training, how many classes have you attended, or how much training do you have with that?
I've got approximately 80 hours. They offer a basic class, and then they offer an advanced class, and I've attended both of those and completed both of those. And I've also attended additional training with their trainers off and on.
Now, when you're assessing using the Leica scan, you don't just go in and use the Leica scan and leave. You look at have you seen body camera evidence in this case?
Yes, sir.
Have you looked at crime scene photos in this case?
Yes, sir.
And you've actually been at the crime scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you can put all that in context along with the Leica scan, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ranger Adcock, I want to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibits 70, 71, 72, and 73, and ask if you recognize those as stills from your Leica scan.
Yes, sir. They appear to be.
This time I offer Defendant's Exhibits 70 through 73.
No objection.
They're all admitted.
Ranger Adcock, I want to, I guess, just make sure we're clear on something. The prosecutor kept talking about percents. He mistakenly asked you whether the plus or minus, this cone is plus or minus 5%, and it's 5 degrees, correct?
Yes, sir.
So when we look at Defendant's Exhibit 71, you have this cone.
Give it a second. Give it a second.
Right.
Push it down. This one? Yeah.
There we go. This line in the center of the cone. Are you confident that that fairly accurately depicts, based on your training experience and use of the Leica scanner, the best representation of the line, the flight path of the bullet that went to the wall?
Yes, sir.
And based on your training, you are taught to say, or you're taught that there is a possibility of plus or minus 5 degrees, correct?
Yes, sir.
But based on what you saw and based on measuring the angle, are you confident in this line in the middle of the cone?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you did let me focus on that. When you did, I think it was 278. The scan perspective for 278. You're taking, you're starting from the doorway and you're going in, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so do you know, like, do you know how far, if we look at States Exhibit 73, do you know how far in that was taken from?
I think it's probably right probably towards the middle in the general area, middle of that doorway, maybe a little bit closer to the locks, in the general area where that flight path line is.
Right here? Or?
Yes, sir. It could be in that general area. Yes, sir.
Did State's Exhibit, or Defendant's Exhibit 70, what is that showing?
That's just a depiction inside the living room area, looking back towards the doorway.
Do you know from where? You know why you took this perspective?
I think that we took that as perspective just to see what we could see. I think it's in line with the doorway that enters the bedroom area.
And if we look at Defendant 71, would that be based on your review of the crime scene and the body cam? Would that have been in line with where in the general area of where the body or the feet of the body was of the complaining witness?
Yes, sir. It could be in the general area.
Did you measure the length from the center of the doorway to the area in the apartment of where the feet of the body were located, lining it up with other markers?
I don't know that I measured from where the feet exactly were because I really couldn't tell exactly, but the general area, we measured a range in there, and I think we came up with 13 to 15 feet right in that general area. But
the general area where the body, or the lower part of the body, is that fair to say?
yes, sir, in that general area.
13 to 15 feet from that area to the center of the doorway.
Yes, sir.
Certainly.
Ranger Adcock. We talked about different tools on the belt, and I believe you identified the taser right there, and OC spray, and a duty weapon. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If an officer is faced with a deadly threat which of these is an officer taught to use to address a deadly threat?
Deadly threat would be the handgun, the weapon.
You wouldn't draw a taser when it's a deadly situation, would you?
No, sir.
Is this called a less lethal option?
Yes, sir. That's one term for it. Yes, sir.
And it can be used in a variety of situations, but when you're faced with deadly force, you're going to go straight to which of these tools?
If it's me, it would probably be the handgun.
And the OC spray, that is what's called a distractionary device. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
If you're going hands-on with someone, it can be an effective way to distract them. Maybe their hands have to go up so you can, they can let go of you and you can get them in handcuffs. Is that fair to say?
That's intent. Yes, sir.
And so, have you ever used OC spray in a closed area?
Yes, sir.
And is that troublesome not only for distracting for the suspect, but also for you because of the closed area and the spray doesn't have enough room to disperse?
Yes, sir.
So it could cause a problem for both of you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And again, you wouldn't use that in a deadly force situation, would you?
No, sir.
I'll pass witness.
Ranger Adcock, did you participate also in the canvass at Southside Flats?
Yes, sir, I did.
Are you aware, just tell me if you're not, whether or not 1476 was vacant or not? The apartment to the right of the complainant in this case, it was unoccupied at the time. Do you know that?
No, sir.
You don't know that?
No, sir.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I passed the witness.
Judges, I just asked that Ranger Adcock be subject to the recall.
You understand that, Ranger?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state of Texas calls April Kendrick.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please make yourself known.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Kendrick. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. Could you tell your full name and spell your full name for the court's reporter?
Yes, my name is April Kendrick, spelled APRILKENDRICK.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Kendrick?
I am the supervisor of the Firearm and Toolmark Unit at the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences, which is also known as SWIFT's or the Dallas County Crime Lab.
Okay. And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you do there specifically.
So my daily duties are overseeing the general operation of the firearms unit itself. In addition to that, I examine and evaluate firearms to determine whether or not they are mechanically functional, if they're operating as they're supposed to. I also examine fired ammunition components as well as unfired ammunition. So that's going to be cartridges, fired cartridge cases, and fired bullets. And I do that, and potentially I'm able to compare that fired ammunition to the firearm itself to potentially determine if those items of evidence were fired by that particular gun. I also examine clothing items for gunshot residue. I could potentially determine a range of distances at which the muzzle end or the front end of the firearm was from a clothing item when a shot was fired. I perform tool mark analysis, serial number restoration, and also provide expert witness testimony.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
I've-
With Swiss in particular?
I've been with Swifts for a little over 14 years.
Okay. And did you have any experience prior to Swifts?
I did not.
Okay. And what is your training and background that qualifies you to have that particular position?
Well, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology and a Master of Science in forensic science. And with Swifts, I went through a formal training program that took it was over the span of approximately 3 years. As a part of that training program, I also trained with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or the ATF, in a program called the National Firearms Examiner Academy, and that was 1 year of my training. And through that training, I performed numerous written, verbal, and practical or hands-on exercises, as well as tests. Upon the completion of my training, I went through some competency tests, which essentially those are just tests to establish that I know what I'm doing and I'm following procedures, and I'm signed off essentially to perform those tests in an independent capacity with the lab. And in addition to that, I take anywhere from about 3 to 5 proficiency tests annually, and those are similar to the competency tests in that it's just testing my ability to provide the correct answer in the test.
Very good. Ms. Kendrick, were you asked by the various law enforcement agencies involved in this investigation, to include the Dallas Police Department, the Texas Rangers, and the Dallas County District Attorney's Office, to do some forensic testing that is consistent with your training and your employment?
Yes, I did.
All right. Your Honor, now proceed with this.
Yes.
All right. Ms. Kendrick, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 247 and 248. Can you tell me if you recognize those two particular items?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what those are?
States Exhibit 247 and 248 are envelopes that are containing 2 fired cartridge cases. And the way that I recognize them is they have the Swift's case number on it, as well as the item number for those particular items, my initials, and the date.
Okay. And I'm also going to show you what's marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 250. If you want to look inside there, that's fine. We'll have to get some gloves, but just from the envelope, can you tell me what's contained inside that envelope?
Yes, States Exhibit 250 is the envelope that would contain the projectile recovered at autopsy, and it appears to still have my original seal on it, and it looks like it's unopened since I sealed it.
Okay. And so that's going to be the projectile, the part of the bullet, or the part of the cartridge that fires, leaving the casing to be ejected, but it's the projectile that goes forward that was recovered from the autopsy.
Yes.
All right, from the deceased body.
Yes, it is.
All right. I also want to show you State's Exhibit number 253. Can you tell me if that is the firearm that you also looked at in your analysis?
Yes, it is, and I recognize it by the serial number on the firearm.
All right. And I'm going to hold 253. Is the serial number going to be imprinted on the weapon itself right here above the trigger?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now published to the jury, Your Honor?
Yes.
All right. So with that unique serial number, you're able to identify that this is the firearm that you did a comparison with to the casings and to the projectile that you just looked at.
Yes, it is, and I have that serial number in my report as well as in my supporting documentation.
Okay. Let's take these one at a time. If this is going to be the gun, I can tell you that already evidence was seized from the defendant on September the 6th. Can you tell me what the results were of your comparison of this firearm to the two cases marked 247 and 248?
Yes, I compared test-fired cartridge cases from that gun. I actually performed those test fires in the laboratory. I compared those to the 2 cartridge cases that I received, and in my opinion, determined that they were fired by that particular firearm.
Okay. So State's Exhibit number 247 and 248, in your expert opinion, these are the cases for which there used to be a projectile that were fired by that gun that we just showed the jury.
Yes.
Can you give the jury an idea? I mean, they may be gun owners, they may not. How? Oh, look at that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you please, using your demonstrative aid that you just happen to have brought with you today for testimony, would you show the jury the different components of what I call a bullet and how they work with each other?
Yes. So if you were to take one unit of ammunition, an unfired piece of ammunition, it's technically called a cartridge. So that's what you're going to load into the gun when you're ready to shoot the gun. It's a cartridge. And the cartridge is made up of 4 different components. The first component is going to be the primer that's in the head of the cartridge case. And this has a chemical mixture inside that's sensitive to being struck. So when a portion of the gun, known as the firing pin, strikes this primer, it creates a spark. And that spark travels into the body of the cartridge case and then lights the gunpowder that's inside on fire. So the first 2 components are the primer and then the gunpowder that's inside. And then the third component is going to be the cartridge case, and the fourth is the bullet. So during the firing process, the firing pin is going to strike the primer, a spark is going to travel into the gunpowder, and that gunpowder is going to light on fire. And during that process, there's going to be a large buildup of pressure inside this cartridge. And the best way for that pressure to escape is for it to push the bullet out of the cartridge case down and out the end of the barrel. And so the bullet leaves the muzzle or the front end of the gun, and the cartridge case in a semi-automatic pistol is going to be extracted and ejected from the gun at the completion of the firing process.
And typically, what direction is the case extracted from the gun?
It depends on the location of the injection port on the firearm.
So I'm going to show you again. State's Exhibit number 253. Can you see where the bullet would be extracted from this handgun?
Yes, where the cartridge case would have extracted from and ejected from the firearm, yes.
Is that going to be on the right side of this firearm?
Yes.
So once the firearm is engaged by pulling the trigger, is this slide well, first of all, is it going to fire that particular projectile out after hitting the primer? The bullet is going to come out the barrel. The projectile is going to come out the barrel. I know I never can use your terms, and I thank you for being patient. And then the case, which was the small item, is extracted to the right of the firearm.
In general, it's going to travel in the right direction, generally.
Okay. Generally, does it go to the right and back, straight to the right, or right and forward, or you don't know?
Let me refer to my notes. I have documented that the general ejection direction is to the right, so no more specific than, in general, it went to the right. And when I'm doing my test firing, I'm actually pointing down and into a tank, and the gun is kind of inside a net that catches my cartridge cases. So as far as really determining ejection direction, it's very general, either to the left or to the right.
Okay, fair enough. All right, and I think that's fair enough representation. So then anyway, if the gun is pointed in this direction and the projectile is fired in that general direction, again, generally, the bullet would be extracted to its right.
Generally, the cartridge case would be extracted to the right.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the projectile itself. State's exhibit number 250. Did you take a look at that projectile itself and compare it to the firearm that we've just shown the jury?
I did.
And can you let the jury know what the results of that analysis were?
The results of that analysis were inconclusive. So what that means is I was unable to determine whether it was or was not fired by the firearm that I received in this case.
And why was that?
I will step back and say that it does have the same class characteristics as the firearm. So the firearm was a 9mm Luger caliber firearm. The bullet itself was a .38 caliber, which is within, or 9mm Luger is within the .38 caliber class. So they were of the same caliber, and it had the same general rifling characteristics. So they had the same class characteristics. But as far as the microscopic comparison, this particular bullet that was recovered from autopsy didn't really have great microscopic markings on the bullet itself. And those are what I'm going to use to do that comparison. So if the markings there aren't very good on the evidence, then it doesn't really lend itself for comparison to test fires.
Okay. So if I understand you, the projectile is characteristic of what could have been fired from that, but you can't conclusively say that that projectile was fired from that gun.
That's correct.
Okay. As far as the shape of the bullet, did you take a look at the actual shape of the bullet? And I guess the best way to start that is, what kind of, these bullets and the projectile portion of them in specific, what are they designed to do upon striking an object?
Well, this particular projectile was actually a hollow point, and really all that is it's a bullet that at the nose end of it, instead of being solid, it's actually hollow. And so those in particular, when they encounter either water, like when I'm firing it into the water tank, or soft tissue, they do what we call mushroom. And so the front end of the bullet will kind of expand and mushroom out. So when you look at it, it kind of looks like a mushroom. You see this portion of the bullet, and then the rest of it is mushroomed over to the sides.
And is that what the bullet, or pardon me, the projectile is designed to do upon hitting, like you said, either water or soft tissue?
Yes.
That's characteristic of what it will appear.
Yes.
And is that how this particular bullet appeared?
Can I refer to my...
Yes, ma'am, and I meant to say
photograph?
projectile again.
Yes, I do have a photograph of the bullet itself, and it does have the mushroomed appearance.
I'm sorry?
I have a photograph of the bullet itself, and it does have the mushroomed appearance like we were speaking of.
Okay, and that appearance, is that going to be characteristic of it striking water or soft tissue?
Yes.
Did you prepare a report that includes a summary of what your testimony has just been?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you what's marked for identification as State's Exhibit number 283. Can you tell me if this is an accurate and complete copy of your report?
Yes, State's Exhibit 283 appears to be a copy of the report that I issued on July 18th, 2019.
All right. And are you a custodian of records for SWIFT, or the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences, as it relates to firearms analysis?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to offer State's Exhibit 283.
Subject.
Just admitted.
Ms. Kendrick, did you, when you were doing your inspection of the firearm itself, did you have an opinion as to whether or not States Exhibit 253, the firearm, is functional?
Yes, it is functional.
All right. And did you do an analysis of the trigger itself to see if it was working in a proper order?
I did.
And what was your opinion?
It was not outside of the manufacturer's specs that they list.
Okay, so consistent with what you would expect?
Yes,
Is a firearm a deadly weapon?
it can be.
Okay. Is it actually under our law per se a deadly weapon?
I'm not familiar with that.
Can firing a gun at somebody cause serious bodily injury and death?
Yes,
And is in fact the gun that I showed you today, the firearm today, both regarded as a handgun and a firearm?
yes.
Kendrick, I just have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Do you know what the speed of the projectile that is that once it leaves the muzzle for this type of weapon is?
No, I don't know what the velocity would have been.
What is the term wobble and tumble? What do those terms mean?
In general, when a projectile leaves the muzzle or the front end of the firearm, it's going to have a spin to it, similar to the way a football flies through the air. If a quarterback were passing the football, it's going to have a spin and it's going to fly straight and pretty accurately. And so when a bullet leaves a firearm, in general, that's how it's going to fly if it's got rifling within the barrel of the gun. The term wobble or tumble would refer to a bullet that doesn't have that spin any longer, and instead of flying straight and spinning as it's flying, it's actually going to tumble end over end.
And could the bullet come into contact with soft tissue or a bone cause a wobble or a tumble?
Because I'm not terribly familiar with the interaction of projectiles within a body, that's really kind of outside of my area.
Let's go to just a shirt or a clothing. Could going through clothing cause a wobble or a tumble?
I really am not certain about that either.
With regard to the ejection pattern of the cartridge case, you can testify that the general pattern from this weapon is to the right.
So I didn't really establish an ejection pattern. I didn't evaluate how the firearm ejects multiple cartridge cases. As I'm doing my test fires, I'm just looking for the general direction that it moves, and it moved to the right. So I wouldn't consider that determining an ejection pattern. It's just, in general, it moves to the right.
So you didn't, you can determine an ejection pattern if you do further testing, is that correct?
No, we don't have ejection patterning as a service that's provided by the lab.
The Swift doesn't do that?
No.
Are you familiar with that testing?
I'm familiar enough to know that it exists, but I haven't had any training in that area, no.
And in your training experience, once a cartridge case leaves, is ejected, a wide number of things can happen to it. They don't always just land perfectly, correct?
That's correct.
And the hollow point ammunition, is that common in law enforcement weapons?
I would say it's common really in any kind of ammunition. I see it regularly in casework.
That's perfect.
Ms. Kendrick, with respect to the projectile, did you remark or did you look at it and do you consider it to be deformed?
Let me refer to my notes. I did not notate that it was deformed. I just noted that it was whole and that it was mushroomed.
Okay. And again, without going over everything that we've already talked about, the mushrooming effect that you've described just now, that is going to be consistent with striking soft tissue or water.
Correct.
All right. Pass witness.
Nothing further.
Case to be excused.
No objection.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kendrick. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break for lunch. We will resume court at 10 minutes after 1.
All right.